Welcome back, Dreadfuls. I'm Jean,
I'm Derek.
and this is the Dr. Dread podcast, where we explore all things unusual, unsettling, and unexplained. Are you ready for tonight, Derek?
Yeah.
All right, we've got something we haven't done yet. We're talking about unethical experiments tonight.
MK Ultra?
MK Ultra is going to need its own episode. We're doing two other ones tonight. MK Ultra is on my list, but that's going to need its whole own episode. Tonight we're talking about the Milgram Experiment and the Stanford Prison Experiment.
I've never heard of those.
All right, well, good. You're going to learn about them.
I thought we were doing MK Ultra. I was so excited.
We will get to MK Ultra, I promise.
All right.
So the Milgram Prison Experiment, it began on August 7th, 1961, and it was a series of psychological experiments conducted by Yale University psychologist Stanley Milgram. Scientists aren't known for being creative with their names. That's why it's the Milgram Experiment. But it was intended to measure the willingness of study participants to obey an authority figure who instructed them to perform acts that conflicted with their own personal conscience.
So kind of like MK Ultra a little bit.
No, not really like MK Ultra. Well, MK Ultra again is its own thing. But to really understand the Milgram Experiment, we need a little bit of historical background.
All right.
Okay, so remember, this started in 1961. So World War II has ended just over 15 years ago. And people worldwide are still reeling from the horrors inflicted by the Nazi regime.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the Holocaust started raising questions about how ordinary individuals could participate or enable such horrible atrocities. Because during the Holocaust, many of the perpetrators defended their actions by claiming that they were just following orders. This was something they saw quite a bit at the Nuremberg trials, and it highlighted the disturbing possibility that ordinary individuals could commit those sorts of heinous acts under the influence of authority. And so, of course, that led to a deeper interest in understanding the psychological mechanisms behind obedience and moral decision-making.
Well, that kind of sounds like they didn't want to die when you think about it. Because Hitler's that type of dude, like, okay, you don't do what I say, I'm just going to murder you.
Yeah, and that's part of what they tried to see went into it a little bit. So the Milgram Experiment, again, conducted by Stanley Milgram, wanted to explore this issue by examining the extent to which people would obey authority figures, even when their actions caused harm to others. But really what he wanted to know was whether there was an inherent difference between, like, the German people who complied with the Nazi regime and other groups of people. He suspected that the obedience exhibited by the Nazis was some distinct characteristic of the German people that wouldn't be present in other groups.
Bullshit.
Yeah, we'll get to the results in a minute, but that was what he was really trying to find out. And so if Milgram did find out that most people wouldn't comply with the commands of an authority figure, that would mean that the German people were somehow more complicit in what happened. And it's kind of an uncomfortable thought to think that something as simple as perceived authority can make the majority of people abandon their personal morals. So that's really what the result he was hoping to achieve out of this experiment.
Well, people don't want to get fucking murdered. That's just the end of the day. That's just what it is.
That is very true. So Milgram planned to use American participants as the first round of this experiment as his control group before repeating the experiment on German participants and other nationalities, and he expected the Germans to behave closer to how the Nazis would have.
How did he acquire these people?
When you conduct an experiment, you put out advertisements about needing participants in an experiment, and people volunteer for it.
Hey, come here. We're gonna make you see how good your morals are, asshole.
Well, when you're running an experiment, when you're running a psychological experiment, you can't tell the participants what exactly it is you're looking for, because if they know what you're testing for, that's going to influence their behavior.
Okay.
So, for this experiment, participants were led to believe that they were assisting, again, in an unrelated experiment. That's what you have to do when you're conducting psychological experiments for the reasons I just gave you. So, they were led to believe that they were going to be administering electric shocks to someone who was supposed to be learning various pairs of words. And these fake electric shocks were going to be gradually increased to levels that would have been fatal had these shocks been real. So the fake experiment was, we're going to see how punishment and how, mild versus severe punishment affects someone's ability to learn things.
Why did people agree to this? Were they getting paid at least?
Yeah. And a lot of times in psychological experiments, they will pay participants for their participation.
Give me money.
Yes, give me money. So each round of the experiment would have three individuals present. First was the experimenter, who was the one in charge of the session. Then there was the teacher, who was the volunteer, the test subject, for each single session. And the teachers were led to believe that they were merely assisting in the experiment, but they were actually the subject of the experiment.
Sounds like a crime on our hands.
Well, we'll get into the ethical questions of this experiment in a little bit. And then there was the learner, who was an actor and an associate of the experimenter, but who was pretending to be another volunteer and the subject of the experiment.
Okay, then. It can't get worse from here.
Oh, it does.
Somebody die?
No one died.
That's actually kind of surprised.
No one died. But so the subject of the experiment and the actor would arrive at the session together, and they're supposed to be both thinking that they're both, people who have been pulled in to participate in this experiment, even though the actor is part of it.
Yeah.
So the experimenter tells them that they're going to be taking part in a study about learning and memory and the effect of punishment on that process. And he always clarified that, the payment for their participation would be secured regardless of the results. And then both the actor, the quote actor, and the participant would draw slips of paper to determine their roles. But, unknown to the actual subject of the experiment, both slips of paper said teacher on it. So the subject would, regardless of which paper they took, would get the role of teacher, and the actor would just say that they got the role of learner.
Oh.
Yes. So once the roles were established, the teacher and the learner were taken into an adjacent room where the learner was strapped into what appeared to be an electric chair.
Okay.
Yes, it's not actually an electric chair, but they had to make the teacher, the subject of the experiment, think that it was. And then the experimenter, dressed in a lab coat in order to appear to have more authority, would tell the participants that they were strapping them in to make sure that the learner can't escape.
Yeah, I don't want to be this dude's lawyer.
Yeah, like I said, this raises a lot of ethical questions. So at some point prior to the actual test starting, the subject/teacher was given a sample of the electric shock that would be administered to the actor/learner, so that they would know exactly what the learner would be receiving when they administered these electric shocks. And this was to prevent the subjects of the experiment from claiming that they didn't know how painful the shocks would be for the learners.
Oh, that's actually kind of smart. Mm-hmm. I gotta give it to him.
Yeah, they are trying to cover their bases on this experiment. So then the teacher and the learner were separated so that they could communicate, but they couldn't see each other.
Okay. Yeah. I'm trying to picture what kind of room I'm looking at here.
I don't think the room matters much, but just the teacher, the subject of the experiment, can hear and talk to the learner who's supposedly strapped to this electric chair, but they can't see them.
Okay.
All right. So then the teacher was given a list of words, and he was supposed to teach the learner, when I say this word, you're supposed to say this other word in reply.
Okay.
And the teacher would read the first pair in the word and 4 possible answers, and the learner's supposed to press a button indicating what the correct corresponding pair word should be.
This is some crazy shit.
Yeah, well, so if the answer's right, they just move on to the next one. But if the answer's incorrect, the teacher is supposed to administer an electric shock to the learner, with the voltage increasing by 15-volt increments for each wrong answer.
Holy shit.
Yeah, so the volts ranged from 15, which is like nothing, you're likely not even going to feel that, all the way to 450 volts.
Oh my god. Holy shit.
Yes, and the shock generator included verbal markings from slight shock to danger severe shock.
What?
Yeah, so the subjects believed that for each wrong answer, they were administering actual shocks to the learner. But like I said, nobody's really getting shocked. Remember, the learner is an actor who's part of the experiment. They just needed the teacher, subject person to believe that this was real.
So the actor's like,
So yes, they told me the actor would do things like that. At certain increments, at certain voltage increments, they gave the actor instructions on how to respond.
holy shit.
Yes.
All right, so you're gonna act like you're about to fucking die over here, and you're gonna act like you feel nothing. All right, there you go, here's your job.
Yeah, that was the job of the actors in this experiment.
Hey, that's nothing too. Oh my fucking god!
Yes, more or less, yes.
All right, let's move on here.
Yeah, so they went all out for this. They set up a tape recorder that would play, corresponding electric shock sounds for each of the shock levels. And as the voltage of, the fake shocks increased, the learner, at certain, the actors were instructed, at certain voltage levels, you're going to be making audible protests, all the way from slight, like, moaning, all the way to, like, screaming.
Fuck you, motherfucker, I'm fucking in pain back here.
Yeah, so like I said, at each voltage level, there were predetermined sounds or phrases that they were supposed to yell. And when they got to the highest voltage, the learner was supposed to fall silent, as if they'd, like, passed out or been killed by this voltage.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. And in a later variation of the experiment, the actor would eventually plead for mercy and yell that they had a heart condition.
Oh my god! Oh my god!
Yes.
Holy shit! Hey, stop it here! My heart's about to stop!
Yeah, that's more or less what the actors were instructed to do, and they wanted to see if, under the authority of the experimenter, the subjects, the teachers of the experiment, would continue to administer these electric shocks.
Huh.
Yes.
Well, I had to pull out the Boston accent there. I don't know if that's Boston or not.
I don't know what accent that was.
That could have been New York. I'm not for sure.
I'm not sure. But if at any time the teacher, subject of the experiment, indicated that they wanted to stop, the experimenter was instructed to give them specific commands to continue. It was meant to test whether the subject would comply with the authority figure or resist. And this was the actual aim of the experiment, to see at what point the subjects would protest, at what point they'd question, at what point would they stop complying with the authority figure, and, would they continue to administer these shocks in the face of moral or personal conscience objections.
I really wonder how these tests went.
Well, we'll get to the results in a minute. So, yeah, the instructors, the experimenter had 4 commands to tell the subject of the experiment to continue. The first time they raised questions about it, they were instructed to say, "Please continue," or "Please go on." At the next resistance from the subject, they were supposed to say, "The experiment requires that you continue."
Okay.
And the next level was, "It is absolutely essential that you continue."
Okay.
And then the 4th command was, "You have no other choice. You must go on."
Okay.
And each of these 4 commands could only be used once the first one was unsuccessful. So if the subject of the experiment was still resisting. So they go from the level 1 command to the level 2 only if the level 1 command was resisted, and so on and so forth.
All right. I wonder how these results were.
Yeah, and the experiment was only halted if they went all the way through the level 4, you have no other choice, you must go on command. Otherwise, it would only stop when the subject reached the maximum 450 shock administration 3 times in a row.
What? These rules are fucking crazy, dude.
Yeah, and there was also specific phrases that the experimenter was supposed to say if the subject had questions about it. For example, if the subject has asked whether, the learner might suffer any permanent physical harm, they were supposed to say, although the shocks may be painful, there is no permanent tissue damage, so please go on.
Okay.
Yeah, and if the subject teacher said they clearly wanted to stop, they were supposed to say, or if the subject teacher said, I think the learner wants to stop, they were supposed to say, whether the learner likes it or not, you must go on until he has learned all the word pairs correctly, so please go on.
Okay. These are kind of weak. I was hoping for like some crazier shit out of this dude.
Well, it's still an experiment. They can't actually threaten these people.
Fair enough.
So before conducting the experiment, Milgram polled 14 Yale University senior year psychology majors to predict, what they thought the behavior of 100 hypothetical people involved in this experiment would be. And all the respondents believed that only a very small fraction, their answers range from 0 to only 3 participants out of 100, would be prepared to inflict the maximum voltage.
Okay, then.
So remember that when we get to the results here.
3. Just
yes,
3.
They thought a maximum 3 out of 100 would get to the maximum voltage.
I would have thrown hands with the dude. I would have thrown hands.
Good for you. Good for you. So Milgram also polled his colleagues, and they also believed that very few subjects would inflict the maximum voltage. And he also polled 40 other psychiatrists from a medical school, and they believed that by the 10th shock, when the victim was supposed to demand to be freed, that most subjects would stop the experiment. And they also predicted that by the 300-volt shock, which is when the learner actor was supposed to go silent and refuse to answer after that point, that roughly 3% of the subjects would still continue.
Oh, let's see.
So, yeah, let's see what the results were. And so the results actually showed that 65% of the participants administered the highest level of shock, up to 450 volts.
Doesn't surprise me.
Even when the learner appeared to be in extreme pain.
Doesn't surprise me.
And all of the participants, 100% of them, continued to administer shocks up to 300 volts, the point where the learners would show significant signs of distress and stop answering.
If I was in that dude's position, me, you better answer my questions. I'm about to wake your ass up.
Oh, jeez. Well, those are the results they got, and not what they expected. So these results completely obliterated Milgram's hypothesis that, the German people were somehow different from others and more willing to obey authority or disregard their moral convictions.
I do not know what they were thinking. I think Americans, to be honest, I'm just going to call us out. I think Americans would be more likely to do it than Germans. I'm being 100% honest.
There you go. You heard it from Derek.
I'm being 100% honest. That's just my thought on it. So, yeah, those results do not surprise me.
Yeah, but what he found was that a lot of the subjects were clearly uncomfortable administering the shocks, many displaying varying degrees of tension and stress, like sweating, trembling, stuttering, biting their lips, groaning, digging their fingernails into the skin. Some were even having fits of nervous laughter. So
Okay.
Yeah, so these people were clearly not comfortable doing it, but they continued to do it anyway.
They weren't wanting to get hit with the ice cream truck.
Hit with the ice cream truck.
Yeah.
Okay.
You didn't hear about that part in the story where that dude said he's going to hit him with an ice cream truck if they didn't do it?
No. No, I think we missed that one.
Yeah, I think you missed that important detail.
Why an ice cream truck?
Because it's ice cream.
Okay.
I just made that up, if you couldn't tell.
Yes, I can tell.
Yeah. Remember that. If you ran into this dude and you did his experiments, he was going to, hit you with an ice cream truck or something like that. I don't ask questions. I don't know how he got an ice cream truck, but he did. I feel like he has one in his backyard if he's still alive right now.
I actually don't know if Milgram's still alive or not.
Milgram sounds like a dude who would be that dude driving an ice cream truck selling ice cream to kids. He might be a pedo, he might not. Just going off the name.
Well, he conducted an ethically dubious experiment. But 14 of the 40 subjects of the experiment showed definitive signs of nervousness or distress. Every participant did question the experiment at least once. But again, most of them continued after being assured by the experimenter that they needed to continue. And Milgram did note that the few participants who refused to administer the final shocks neither insisted that the experiment be terminated nor left the room to check on the welfare of the learner.
They just kind of walked out?
They just kind of walked out. And so after this first experiment concluded, Milgram later did other variations on this experiment throughout the world with similar results. For example, he changed the location of the experiment. Instead of, conducting it at Yale University, which is a, respectable, well-known university and carries a sense of authority with it just on its own. Just by virtue of it being a Yale University study, he found a random, unregistered backstreet office in a city, so kind of like just a hole-in-the-wall office, and conducted the experiment there to see if the perceived lower level of authority of it being there had any effect on the experiment. And he found that although somewhat reduced, there was not a significantly lower reduction in the obedience of the participants.
I feel like it would have been higher. Personally, I think it would have been higher.
Well, he was trying to reduce the supposed authority of the experimenters.
I think it would have been higher because if I went to a hole in the wall office, I'd be like, this dude might kidnap me.
That's a valid concern.
I guess depending on just how hole in the wall this place was, that might be a concern.
I'd be thinking, I might have to kill a motherfucker today. I don't want to get kidnapped.
Well, apparently your thought process was a little different than a lot of the participants, and completely the opposite of what Milgram was expecting with this experiment. Oh.
I'm thinking, if this dude tries to attack me, I'm throwing him through a window. Am I the only one who has a brain, apparently?
Apparently you're the only one thinking on those lines with regard to this experiment.
What? It's a valid concern.
I know it's a valid concern.
So you're telling me if you rolled up to a random office and probably, imagine you roll up to an office in a not so good city and you're doing this experiment, I'd be like, I don't know if I'm going to get kidnapped or not.
Hey, fair enough observation. Fair enough.
Am I the only one who are concerned about my surroundings and about what I'm doing?
Evidently so. But anyway, back to Milgram's experiments. In another version of the experiment, he found what did make a difference on how far the participants would go in obeying the experimenter was their proximity to the learner. Basically, the closer they were, the more they resisted the authority of the experimenter, and the farther apart they were, the more likely they were to obey the experimenter and show less empathy.
What, like he just pulls him into a random room and say, hey, you gotta continue, or I'm gonna, like, punch you or something.
No, how close the subject was to the supposed learner who's getting shocked.
Well, that doesn't make sense.
Basically, if they're closer together, the subject of the experiment's going to resist the commands to shock them more.
Well,
and if they're further away, they're going to obey the experimenter more.
Well, that just seems like a load of bullshit. To be honest, it went bad for me.
Good for you. I'm just reporting what the experiments found.
Well, who did they fucking test?
Again, just random people who show up and agree to participate in the experiment.
Well,
that's what you want. You don't want to pick select people for an experiment like this because you want a cross section of everybody who's just a good representation of the population in general.
Well, clearly they got a poor representation of it because everybody seems like they were a fucking idiot. If I'm being honest, I mean, these results seem fucking confusing. This is not what I was expecting.
So what were you expecting?
Everybody say, oh, I don't give a fuck. I'm just gonna shot this motherfucker.
Well, that's kind of what they found, is that, even though they didn't want to, they would continue shocking these supposed learners.
Well, fair enough. I really don't know. He pulled some random ass people.
Random ass people. Again, that is what you do when you're conducting a psychological experiment.
Are we sure these people weren't fucking NPCs or something? Are we sure these weren't, like, real people? Because from what I'm hearing, these people sound fake as fuck.
Only as sure as we can be that any other random person you see on any given day isn't an NPC.
Well, you gotta ask them.
Okay, well, eventually Milgram ran one more version of the experiment, identical to the original, except for one significant factor. The teacher subject of the experiment was told that they were free to select any level of shock for the trials.
Not gonna lie, I would turn that bitch to 100.
Oh, see, you're falling into the experiment. You'd crank it all the way up.
Let's see what would happen. Just interested.
See, there you go.
You know, like they said about Curious George, he was a communist.
Why are we bringing Curious George into this?
You don't know? You don't know the secret?
Yes, I've heard that he's a communist. I'm questioning what this has to do with the Milgram experiment.
Well, George was fucking curious. They said curiosity killed the cat, but it couldn't kill the monkey. The yellow monkey, at least. Maybe Curious George was yellow because he was trying to say he was a communist.
But communism is typically associated with red, not yellow.
Well, they have a bit of yellow in it. Think about it. Think about it. Well, no, he didn't wear a red suit. I don't.
No, Curious George lives with the man in the yellow hat. He wore a yellow suit.
Yeah, see, he's basically saying, "Hey, I might be communist."
Again, communism is traditionally associated with red, not yellow.
But it has a little bit of yellow in it.
Oh, Lord, child.
I'm just being honest. I'm trying to connect dots.
That little bit of yellow, are you referring to the Chinese flag?
Maybe I haven't seen
the Chinese Communist Party. I think that's what you mean.
I think that's what I mean. I haven't seen.
Because communism is just a political theory. It does not have colors. It doesn't have a flag of its own.
Well, I'm thinking of China, and they're communists. Just think about it. Think about it. Maybe he was ahead of the game. Maybe he knew something we didn't. Maybe he's a time traveler.
Okay, I am not sure how we got so far sidetracked.
See, I'm making you think about it.
Oh Lord, that you are. But yeah, let's get back to the prison experiment, to the Milgram experiment here. Yeah, so like I said, identical experiment, except the subjects' teachers were told they were free to select the level of shock administered. And in an article about his findings that was published in Harper's Magazine called The Perils of Obedience, which was an abridged and adapted from a paper about his studies that he published in 1974, he said, he was wanting to test to see if having a choice in what punishment to administer made a difference. And Milgram said, one theoretical interpretation of this behavior holds that all people harbor deeply aggressive instincts continually pressing for expression, and that the experiment provides institutional justification for the release of these impulses. According to this view, if a person is placed in a situation in which he has complete power over another individual, whom he may punish as he likes, all that is sadistic and bestial in man comes to the fore. The impulse to shock the victim is seen to flow from the potent aggressive tendencies which are part of the motivational life of the individual. And the experiment, because it provides social legitimacy, simply opens the door to their expression. So he's saying one theory on why his prior experiment turned out the way it did is because people are just sadistic at heart. And the experiment gives them basically validation to express those sadistic tendencies.
What car did he drive to this experiment?
How would I know that?
Well, I was just asking a question. If he rolled up in a van, this may have been very different.
I'm almost afraid to ask, why would a van make a difference?
Wouldn't it be a little sketchy? You roll up to a hole-in-the-wall office, and the dude that's telling you to come to this experiment is driving a white van?
Okay, this is not the hole-in-the-wall experiment anymore. This is a recreation of the first one, just with the subjects are free to use any level of shock they want to.
Fair enough.
Yeah, so in this experiment, the experimenter was sure to emphasize that the teacher subject of the experiment could use either the highest shock level, the lowest, or anything in between.
Huh.
And again, the learner actors' protests were supposed to coordinate to specific voltage levels, the same as the first experiment. You know, the first moans of pain coming at 75 volts, and the first strong protest at 150 volts.
How do I unlock I have the heart condition voice line from this experiment?
I don't know, but I think you have to get higher up than the 150.
All right, so if I go above 150, I can unlock that secret voice
You
line.
can unlock the I have a heart condition voice line. Yes.
All right, cool.
But hey, in experiments, you want to have consistent voice lines, because any variance in what the people doing the experiment say could influence your results. So even though they do kind of act like NPCs for this experiment, that's actually very important when you're conducting an experiment like this, is you want to control all your variables and have them be the same across the board as much as possible.
See, if I was in this experiment, this guy wouldn't know what to do, because I would crank that bitch up to 100, and then I would close my eyes and just move it until I find one that I like.
Just going on the voice lines?
Yeah.
Maybe you're the sadistic one that Milgram was talking about.
Maybe. Or no, what I mean by that is I would just move the thing until I pick a voltage. So like, okay, I don't know which one I'm picking. Here we go.
You mean you just pick it at random?
Yeah, close my eyes and just move it around until I find one.
That could be viewed as sadistic as well, my friend. that you might be administering, dangerous levels of voltage to somebody based on chance.
50-50.
Because remember, the people in this experiment don't know that the actor is an actor. They think it's real.
I have an heart condition.
Yes, that's what some of them are saying. But anyway, in this new version of this experiment, 40 subjects were tested, and the average voltage across all of the trials with them was less than 60 volts. So lower than the point at which the learner actors showed the first signs of discomfort.
Could I get a New Yorker actor for this one? Can I unlock the actor that's from New York so I could hear I have a heart condition voice line in a New York accent?
I have a heart condition. I don't know if that was more Boston than New York. I'm not very good at I'm not very good at Northeast New England accents. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I want the secret New York edition. Where did I find that one?
I don't know. I don't know, my dude.
Maybe on the issue. Maybe he was talking about me.
He might have been talking about you. Milgram might have been talking about you. It's me. Hi, I'm the problem. It's me.
Yeah. He was talking about me.
So anyway, like I said, the average was less than 60 volts. So 3 of the subjects didn't go beyond the very lowest shock setting. 28 went no higher than 75 volts. So when the very first, grunts of pain came from the actors, 38 wouldn't go beyond 150. So the first strong protest.
Fucking idiots.
And only 2 subjects were the exception to these rules. One went up to 325 and one went all the way up to 450.
See, I would have been with that dude who went up to 450. Just to fuck with him. Be like, here you go, we're at the mats. Don't fuck this up. Oh, you fucked it up. Boom. All right, we're bringing you down to 15.
Yeah, see, it's you. You're the problem. You're the one Milgram was talking about.
Yeah.
So, overall, the results of this experiment showed that a majority of people delivered very low, usually painless shocks when the choice was left to them.
Well, I guess there's that time I was like, what if I pushed it up to this?
Yeah, maybe the 2 just wanted to see what would happen. We don't know.
They're bored. They were bored.
But at the conclusion of this experiment, Milgram had this to say. This is perhaps the most fundamental lesson of our study. Ordinary people, simply doing their jobs and without any particular hostility on their part, can become agents in terrible destructive processes. Moreover, even when the destructive effects of their work become patently clear, and they are asked to carry out actions incompatible with fundamental standards of morality, relatively few people have the resources needed to resist authority.
He's wearing a fucking lab coat. You think I'm scared of a dude in a lab coat?
Okay, maybe you are not scared of a dude in a lab coat.
No, I'm not. He's wearing a fucking lab coat. Well, all he got is a fucking pencil or something, taking fucking notes. I would be fucking with both of them, the actor and the fucking experimenter. They wouldn't know what to do. I'd be like, okay, 450. Oh, we're bringing down to 15. We're just gonna set 15 per minute. Oh, we're back at 450.
Okay. All right. Let me read you a few more things Milgram had to say about his experiments. He said, the most frequent defense of the individual who has performed a heinous act under the command of authority is that he has simply done his duty. In asserting this defense, the individual is not introducing an alibi concocted for the moment, but is reporting honestly on the psychological attitude induced by submission to authority. And he also went on to say the problem of obedience is not wholly psychological. The form and shape of society and the way it is developing have much to do with it. There was a time, perhaps, when people were able to give a fully human response to any situation because they were fully absorbed in it as human beings. But as soon as there was a division of labor, things changed. Beyond a certain point, the breaking up of society into people carrying out narrow and very specific jobs takes away from the human quality of work and life. A person does not get to see the whole situation, but only a small part of it, and is thus unable to act without some kind of overall direction. He yields to authority, but in doing so is alienated from his own actions. So Milgram was really saying that, yeah, it seems like people generally will defer to authority, but part of that is just the nature of society and the way it's developing, that society has developed this kind of hierarchical structure, and people have very limited, narrow roles that they play. And so just because that is the way society is developing and that is the way people are used to behaving in society, people will defer to authority when maybe they otherwise wouldn't.
I just had this question. What if somebody told him, man, I wanted to get shot today?
I don't know. I don't think he addressed that question of what he would do if one of the participants asked to switch roles.
Maybe I would have done that.
So I don't think anybody did that.
I would have tried to mess with him.
My dude, you would be the bane of any psychological experimenter's existence. You just go try to fuck with them.
Yeah, it's fun. Yeah. Oh, that dude? Oh, yeah, he looks like fucking Jimmy Bob. Hey, let me switch roles with him. He got a heart condition.
It's Smart Pot.
Thank you, Rick. Now I have the Smart Pot commercial in my head, and now it won't go away.
Hey, I'm talking here. I'm trying to get shot today.
I think you might be the only person who would volunteer to be the learner and get shocked. But even then, it wouldn't work, because remember, the shocks are fake.
Yeah. I'd be like, bitch, you complain about nothing. This don't feel like shit.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah, see, if you want to test me a psychological, experiment test, do not contact me, because I'm just going to fuck with you.
Yep, you heard it right here. Derek will fuck with you in every way imaginable.
Yeah, why not?
So, okay, anyway, let's talk about the ethical questions that came up with this experiment.
Very not. Very illegal.
Yeah, it's looked at as not good. I remember learning about this one when I did my undergrad in psychology, and about this as an example of how you don't press people to continue an experiment when they say they want to stop. That's what this was used as an example for. But there are other ethical questions that came up. It raised controversy because of the extreme emotional stress that it caused some of the participants, and inflicted insight that it suffered on them. And inflicted insight is a possible consequence of certain kinds of psychological research when a subject is given insight by the nature of their participation in the experiment into their flaws, often that they weren't expecting, and that can cause severe emotional distress for some people. Basically, it's when an experiment forces someone to confront uncomfortable truths about themselves that they really didn't want to hear.
Well, you had to learn it someday.
Yeah, but still, the critique on the experiment was that Milgram didn't do a good enough job of reaching out to the participants and making sure that they were not too psychologically scarred from this experiment.
Well, you know what? They should have said, hey, let me switch roles. Let me see what it feels like.
Yeah. Let's see. In a 1964 write-up in The American Psychologist by a woman named Diana Baumrind, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Baumrind. She said that even though Milgram obtained consent from the subject of the experiment, he was still ethically responsible to ensure their well-being, which is true. Every time you run an experiment, you have to make sure that you are looking out for the well-being of the subjects of your experiment. And even when participants displayed signs of distress, we talked about the sweating, the nervousness, the nervous laughter that a lot of them broke up into. Yes. The experimenter should have stopped at that point and halted the experiment, but they didn't.
Well, he wouldn't have to worry about me.
Yeah, and actually, Baumrind's criticisms of the Milgram experiment stimulated a thorough revision of ethical standards for psychological research.
Who the fuck did he hire? He hired fucking bitches or something? These people couldn't take shit. They got fucking robbed at gunpoint. They would be fucking pissing their pants or something.
So would most people, Derek.
Fair enough. But it's a fucking experiment. He ain't gonna fucking die.
But you're missing the point. The point is the subjects of the experiments didn't know that. They thought they were actually inflicting harm on these people to the point where they had possibly died.
They're still responding. They didn't fucking die.
No, remember the shocks, when they got to a point at 300, they stopped responding.
Well, wake them up.
And then they were supposed to go all the way to 450.
Well, wake him up. Give him a wake-up shot. Say, wake up, Tony.
No, that wasn't part of the experiment. So remember, these people thought they were actually inflicting that much harm onto somebody else. And it was very distressing for a lot of them.
Well, you know what? They should ask to swap roles.
Again, by the virtue of the setup of the experiment, they wouldn't let them swap roles.
Oh, come on. It can't be too bad. He got a heart condition. Let me swap roles with him.
But remember, the person getting shocked is a fake. They can't swap roles.
Fair enough, but it's like, come on.
So anyway, another critique of the experiment is its applicability to the Holocaust in general. Because remember, the experiment kind of showed that it wasn't just the German people. Anyone can fall victim to what happened in the Holocaust. But there's critique on that conclusion. James Waller, who's chair of the Holocaust and Genocide Studies at Keene State College, said that the Milgram experiments don't correspond well for these 4 reasons that he listed. First, the subjects of the Milgram experiment were assured in advance that no permanent harm would come to the other supposed participant because of their actions. But in the Holocaust, the perpetrators knew fully well that what was happening to people in the Holocaust, that they were killing and maiming their victims.
See, there you go. No harm was going to come from this experiment. That would have been good enough for me.
Yeah, but still. So point number 2, the subjects of the Milgram experiment didn't know their victims, and they weren't motivated by racism or other biases. On the other hand, Holocaust perpetrators often displayed an intense devaluation of Holocaust victims through a lifetime of personal development. You know, the Nazi propaganda that the Jews were the source of all the problems, and that the Jews and other groups who were persecuted were the unwanted people of society.
What was he supposed to fucking tell him? Oh, this dude robbed the fucking corner store, so you're gonna torture him now.
No, see, that was part of the experiment, is just to sort of get a baseline for what people would do. But this is the criticism of the experiment on how it's not a direct one-to-one comparison to the Holocaust.
Well, you should have done one like that.
How are you going to do a one-to-one comparison of the Holocaust?
Well, you don't have to do a one-to-one comparison, but you can say, this dude robbed the corner store, you can do whatever the fuck you feel like to him.
And again, that's going to skew the results. So anyway, point number 3, those serving punishment at the labs weren't sadists, they weren't hate mongers, and as we saw in the results of the experiment, they often exhibited great anguish and conflict over the experiment, unlike many of the people who were the architects of what the Nazis called the final solution. They had a goal to wipe certain people off of the planet. And then last point, the Milgram experiment lasted only an hour. There wasn't time for the subjects to really contemplate the implications of their behavior. Meanwhile, the Holocaust lasted for years, with ample time for people to have a moral assessment of their actions.
Only an hour? What the fuck? This is bullshit. How much am I getting paid for this shit?
You're just worried about how much you're going to get paid.
Yeah? Times are tough. A fucking Tootsie Roll's $1. I can't buy a fucking Snickers without being $3.30.
Okay, well, there's other questions about this experiment, specifically about the validity of the experiment. In 2012, there was an Australian psychologist named Gina Perry who investigated the data from Milgram's experiment and his writings on it, and she concluded that Milgram had manipulated the results, and that there was what she called a troubling mismatch between published descriptions of the experiment and the evidence of what actually transpired.
So he's a lying piece of shit.
So
okay,
he
fuck
might
him.
have fabricated some of it. She wrote that only half the people who undertook the experiment fully believed that it was real. So already the results of the experiment are dubious because a lot of them didn't believe it was real. And she said 66% disobeyed the experimenter.
So he's a weak piece of shit.
So possibly.
What did I fucking say earlier? A lab coat don't mean shit.
But in a later book that was critical of Perry's findings about the validity of Milgram's experiment, another researcher named Nestor Russell and John Picard took issue with what Perry said about, the questionability of Milgram's experiment, for not mentioning that there have been several replications of the Milgram experiment with better safeguards in place for the participants. And most of these experiments actually have yielded results similar to Milgram's original experiment.
Well, this seems like a bunch of bullshit. Nobody can figure out their fucking story if their life depended on it.
So, there's some questionability about the experiment, but we do have several subsequent experiments that have given us similar results.
Fuck Milgram, fuck the other two people, I don't know their fucking names, but the Australian woman, good for her. Calling out his bullshit. I'm gonna believe he's a fucking phony.
Okay, well there you go. And that's it for the Milgram experiment.
That's my fucking thoughts.
All right. Well, if you thought the Milgram experiment was was wonky and was not conducted well, now we're going to get on to the Stanford Prison Experiment.
Well, it's already a prison, so it's going to be ran like
no,
shit.
It's not a real prison.
Oh. Well, still, if it's trying to be a prison, it's still going to be ran like shit.
This experiment was run like shit. We will get into it, but yeah, this experiment was a flaming hot piece of garbage.
Let's fucking go.
So,
did somebody die here?
No one died.
Fair enough.
No one died, but this whole experiment was an absolute dumpster fire.
It seems that the person who ran this was a fucking idiot.
Well, I'll skip ahead here for just a little bit. This experiment has been called unscientific at best and straight up fraudulent at worst.
Oh, well, let's fucking go.
So, yeah, like I said, this experiment is a whole dumpster fire hot mess.
I'm about to have a field day here.
So, the Stanford Prison Experiment was a psychological experiment that took place starting in August of 1971.
So, another person I could fuck with.
Sure, yeah, fuck with this guy all the way, because, yeah, from what my research pulled up about this experiment is, fuck him all the way. So it was supposed to be a 2-week simulation of a prison environment that examined the effects of, a situation on, whatever situation participants are placed in on their reactions and behaviors.
Okay.
Yeah, so Stanford University, it was conducted at Stanford University by psychology professor Philip Zimbardo.
Philip, you fucking piece of shit.
Yeah. So, incidentally, this study was actually funded by the U.S. Office of Naval Research to help them understand antisocial behavior in general.
The fucking Navy?
Yeah, and the United States Marine Corps wanted to investigate the conflict between military guards and prisoners.
Well, this guy's gonna fuck with them because he got government funding.
Yeah. So the official website of the Stanford Prison Experiment, when it was going on, said the goal was this. We wanted to see what the psychological effects were of becoming a prisoner or prison guard. To do this, we decided to set up a simulated prison and then carefully note the effects of this institution on the behavior of all those within its walls.
This sounds like a load of bullshit already.
Well, it's already a load of bullshit because, okay, so you want to study that, but they're just setting up a fake prison, but they don't have any sort of control group to measure it against.
Yeah, that's already raising eyebrows.
Yeah, already a fundamental tenet of running any sort of experiment is that you have your experiment group in which you're looking at the results of whatever experiment you're running, and then you have the control group where you don't run the experiment to get a baseline to compare your experiment results on.
Or just go to a fucking prison.
Yeah, I mean, the way they set this up, it was really no different than just observing results at a prison. From what I found, there were really no stated hypotheses about this. Like I said, there was no control group that they were comparing it against. It just really violates all manner of actually conducting a proper scientific experiment.
This guy sounds like he can't run a fucking Target if his life depended on it.
Hey, don't drag Target into this.
Those are hard to run. You got Karens all the time going in.
Yeah, so don't drag Target into
I'm
this.
well,
Target isn't Walmart, okay?
well, the only reason I'm dragging Target into this is because it's harder to manage than Walmart.
Yeah, see, they do it better than Walmart.
That's what I mean. This guy can't run a Target if his
No.
life depended on it.
No, he couldn't run a Target. But a 1996 article from the Stanford News Service described the experiment in more detail like this. Zimbardo's primary reason for conducting the experiment was to focus on the power of roles, rules, symbols, group identity, and situational validation of behavior that would generally repulse ordinary individuals. So already that's a lot of variables that you're trying to monitor in one experiment. Ordinarily, you'd want separate experiments to look at each individual variable that you're trying to measure or quantify in this experiment.
So this guy...
That's just way too much to try to keep track of in one experiment.
And he don't even have people to keep track of this shit already.
Yeah, and Zimbardo himself was quoted as saying, "I've been conducting research for some years on de-individualization, vandalism, and dehumanization that illustrated the ease with which ordinary people could be led to engage in antisocial acts by putting them in situations where they felt anonymous, or where they could perceive of others in ways that made them seem less human, such as enemies or objects."
Or what if somebody just don't want to talk to a person?
Yeah, what if someone's just, a massive introvert and doesn't want to talk to people anyway?
Like, I don't want to be walking around in Walmart and some dude comes up to me and wants to talk about the stock market.
Yeah, granted, I wouldn't want to talk about the stock market either, but essentially the experiment was designed to try to scientifically investigate the power of roles, rules, group identity, and situational validation of behavior. So like I said, that's a lot to be crammed into one experiment.
Whoa, they're going to find, well, this dude was hitting the gritty at 4:20 in the afternoon, and this dude was hitting the dab at 3:50 in the afternoon.
I have no clue what any of that means.
I'm just saying a bunch of shit, to be honest. He's going to start writing down the wrong things. He's going to be like, okay, this dude doesn't want to talk to this dude because this dude is, yeah.
Well, we'll get into that in just a minute. Participants were recruited from the local community through an advertisement in newspapers offering $15 per day, which would be $113 as of 2023, to male students who wanted to participate in what they called a psychological study of prison life.
$130?
$113.
$113 a day.
$113 per day.
Can I get signed up? Put pen to paper right now. I'll take it.
Yeah, see, you were asking about how they find people for experiments. That's what they do. They put out advertisements and they pay them for their time.
2 weeks? Pen to paper.
Well, it was supposed to last for up to 2 weeks. We'll get into how long it actually lasted.
Oh, wait. This dude scammed people. He only made them stay like 2 days.
We'll get into how long it actually lasted. 75 people replied, and participants were chosen after assessing their psychological stability, and then randomly assigned to the role of being either prisoners or prison guards.
What if somebody said it depends on the day?
We don't know. That they had to keep the same role through the whole experiment, so it wouldn't depend on the day. But 24 in total were selected to participate. The people that they picked were predominantly white, middle class, and appeared to be psychologically stable and healthy. And the group was selected to intentionally exclude people with criminal backgrounds, psychological impairments, or medical problems.
Okay.
So, the volunteers were, and so they were split into 2 groups. There were 24 participants. They were split into 2 groups. Half were assigned to the guard role, half were assigned to the prison role, 9 in each group, plus 3 potential substitutes, alternates in each group.
All right. Was this dude fat shaming people?
I don't know if there was specifically fat shaming, but there was a lot of abuse going on. So we'll get to that in a minute.
Okay. Well, that's
So the
interesting.
people who were selected to be guards were given uniforms designed to specifically de-individualize them, like, it looked like prison guard uniforms, and were instructed to prevent the prisoners from escaping.
Oh, it's like escape jail, but you're not gonna get a federal charge this time.
Right. So the experiment took place in the basement of Jordan Hall, which is Stanford's psychology building. It was a 35-foot section of the basement, and the prison had two fake walls that they erected, one at the entrance and one at the cell wall to block observation. Each cell for the prisoners was 7 by 10 feet, was unlit, and was intended to house 3 prisoners and had a cot for each prisoner.
All right.
The prisoners were confined and told to stay in their cells and the little, prison yard that they were allowed to be in all day and night until the study was finished. The guards, on the other hand, had a different environment to stay in, separate from the prisoners. The guards were given access to special areas for rest and relaxation and were told to work in shifts of 3 for 8-hour shifts each. And the guards didn't have to be there on site when they weren't on shift, so they could leave and go elsewhere.
Well, that's bullshit. It just takes away from what you're actually doing.
Yeah, that's kind of bullshit. Like I said, this experiment was a hot mess.
So you're what was the walls made out of?
They probably just erected little plywood walls or something.
I'm kicking it down. I'm escaping.
Okay, so Zimbardo himself assumed the role of superintendent of the prison, and
Of
then he
course he
had
did.
an undergraduate research assistant named David Jaffe, who was the warden.
David Taffy?
Jaffe.
Okay, Jaffe, got it.
I assume it's pronounced Jaffe. It's Jaffe. It might be Jaff. It might be Jaffe. I'm guessing here.
I literally thought you said Taffy.
No, I did not say Taffy.
I was about to be like, oh, that's good. Who made Laffy Taffy?
Okay, so anyway, before the experiment began, Zimbardo had an orientation session for the guards the day before the experiment began. The guards were instructed not to harm the prisoners physically and not to withhold food or drink, but to maintain law and order.
Well, what the fuck is that supposed to mean?
Yeah, bad instructions. And the researchers provided the guard with wooden batons, prison uniforms that were meant to de-individualize them, and mirrored sunglasses to give them more anonymity.
Well, if one breaks out, what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to chase them down or just let them go?
That they're supposed to keep them in the prison, so I guess if they broke out, they were supposed to chase them down.
Be like, what if I just body slam this dude because he's escaping?
Well, they didn't have any escapees, so we don't know what would have happened.
Oh, I was man enough to do it. See what would happen.
But based on recordings of the experiment, guards were instructed by Zimbardo and other researchers to refer to prisoners only by their assigned prison number, not their name. And according to Zimbardo, that was intended to diminish the prisoner's individuality.
056, come up here. You're getting chicken and broccoli.
Yes. That's basically what they were doing.
Because we hate you.
So again, Zimbardo insisted that the guards were instructed not to inflict physical harm on the prisoners, but at the same time to make sure the prisoners felt like they were in an actual prison.
I don't think I would get that feeling if I was there. Because I'm in a fucking basement.
Well, again, they're in a basement. They made it kind of look like a prison.
Well, to be fair, it's a basement.
It's a basement. It's not like it's one of the more finished rooms of the school.
Well, still, it's more finished than a prison.
Have you seen some basements? Not really.
Depends on the basement. Have you seen a storm? Have you seen like some basements? Some people got those decked out.
Yeah, that's true. Some people do deck out their basements, but
So it depends on the basement.
it depends on the basement.
Basements matter, people.
Oh lordy! But remember, this is done at, even though it's done at Stanford University, it's still a school. They don't spend a lot of money on their basements.
Fair enough. But to be honest, hey, that basement looks lovely. Oh, that basement looks like I'm about to die.
Yes, that is true. But anyway, so the experiment officially began when the prisoners were arrested by real Palo Alto police in California and brought to the mock prison.
What?
Yeah, they had real police officers arrest them.
Just show up to our house and say, hey, you're coming with us now.
Mm-hmm.
I would be like, what the fuck? I didn't sign up for this shit.
So, like I said, day one of the experiment, the participants who had been assigned the prisoner role were mock arrested by Palo Alto police, either at their homes or wherever they were found. And the participants were the prisoner role participants were intentionally not informed that they were going to be arrested because the researchers wanted it to come as a surprise.
Would I catch a charge if I ran?
Not really, because there's no real charges.
Fair enough.
So, this was actually a breach of Zimbardo's own ethics that he wrote out in the contracts that they signed for this experiment.
Oh,
so
shit.
He's already breaching his own ethical, contractual obligations to these people.
He's catching a lawsuit.
But they did it anyway.
He's catching a lawsuit.
Yeah. And so this mock arrest involved charging them with crimes of armed robbery and burglary. And the Palo Alto Police Department assisted Zimbardo's team with the simulated arrests by performing full booking procedures on the prisoners at the Palo Alto City Police Headquarters, including reading them their Miranda rights, fingerprinting them, and taking mugshots.
What the fuck?
Yeah, so they went through the whole charade.
I would say, hey, if you're gonna arrest me, at least put me in a nice car.
No, they're not getting in a nice car. They just got picked up in the police cars.
Well, it depends. Which one? I'll keep running until I find one that's good enough.
I don't think you have a choice when they catch you on which police car they toss you in.
Could they tase you though? I just want to know these rules. This is crazy.
That's a good question. I don't think anybody was tased in these mock arrests, but that's a good question.
I'm just asking fair
I know,
points.
that's actually a good question. But considering how Zimbardo ran most of this experiment, he probably would have told the cops, go for it.
Piece of shit.
Yeah. So after the booking process, the prisoners were taken to the mock prison from the police station, and it was called the Stanford County Jail, where they were systematically then strip searched and given their inmate numbers and their inmate uniform.
Well, this is a lot of... I ain't earned enough money for this shit.
Yeah. So yeah, they actually strip searched them. They were trying to make it as actually prison-like as possible. So the prisoners wore comfortable, ill-fitting prison uniforms without any underwear, as well as chains around one ankle.
I don't think prisons do that. I think that might be a little bit illegal.
Most prisons, they don't wear chains all the time anymore, just when they're being transported from one place to another.
Well, yeah, that's what I thought, but it's you're not in the cell.
But no, they were apparently wearing chains. And the guards were instructed, again, to call the prisoners by their assigned numbers instead of their name, as Zimbardo said, dehumanizing them. And the prisoners were then, once they were brought to the mock jail, were greeted by the warden, the graduate student playing the warden, who conveyed to them the seriousness of their offenses and their new status as prisoners. So with the rules of the prison established, the inmates were taken to their cells for the rest of day one.
I would have said they got the wrong guy. Just to mess with the student. I'd be like, hey, they got the wrong guy.
Well, again, a real prison system, the way it works, even if the police do arrest the wrong person, just you telling them, hey, you got the wrong guy, isn't going to make them release you.
His name is Jimmy Smith.
So if someone did try that, I don't think anyone tried that, but if someone did try that, the way they'd probably play it is, hey, that's between you and an attorney to work out. You're still here. Because that's what would happen in a real prison setting.
Would the student know that, though? I would just try to confuse the student.
You're thinking the right way.
I'm just thinking.
All right, so on to day 2. So day 2, of course, the guards begin referring to the prisoners by their numbers and keep them confined to their cells. And then apparently at 2:30 a.m. that day, the guards tried to issue a wake-up call to the prisoners at 2:30 a.m. for some reason by blowing whistles and clanging their batons on the makeshift bars. And the prisoners tried to rebel against this. They wouldn't leave their cells to go out into the yard. They ripped off their inmate, tag numbers and insulted the guards. And in response, the guards sprayed them with fire extinguishers.
Holy shit.
Yeah, 3 backup guards were called in to help regain control, and the guards removed all the prisoners' clothes, so now they are completely undressed, and took their mattresses, so now they have no mattresses to sleep on, and sentenced the main instigators to time in a special detention unit, so kind of like solitary confinement. And one of the guards was even said to have said to another one that these are dangerous prisoners.
Wow.
Yeah, that was only on day 2.
We couldn't get past 2 days without somebody trying to kill somebody.
Yeah, we couldn't get past day 2 without shit going bananas.
You can't blow fire extinguishers in people's faces because bad things happen.
Yeah, but they did it.
People can't breathe.
But they did it. Yeah, I know, because it's CO2.
Yeah.
But they did it.
That could have got somebody murdered.
Yeah, that could have been very bad, but they did it.
Wow.
So on to day 3. In order to restrict further acts of disobedience, the guards separated and rewarded 3 prisoners who had only had minor roles in the rebellion from day 2. So they got to spend time in the good cell where they had their clothes back, they had their beds back, and food was denied to the rest of the jail population.
They're breaking a rule.
They're breaking the rules already. So after about 12 hours of this, the 3 were returned to their old cells that lacked beds with everybody else. And the guards, as you see, were starting to abuse their power to humiliate the inmates. They'd have prisoners count off and do push-ups arbitrarily. They restricted their access to bathrooms, and eventually forced them to relieve themselves in buckets in their cells.
Where is Philip?
Zimbardo's still he's seeing all of this. He's watching all of this happen because he is the prison superintendent, remember?
Is this his way to get his fantasies out of torturing people?
Those have been one of the accusations kind of levied against him.
That's the first thing I'm thinking.
Day 3 also saw the first participant to leave the experiment. Douglas Corpy, otherwise known as Prisoner 8612.
Corpy?
Corpy.
Corgi?
Corpy.
Corpy.
Yes. Korpi. Corpy.
Okay, not corgi.
Not corgi, not the dog.
Got it.
So he'd been in, the prison simulation about 36 hours, and he had an apparent mental breakdown and yelled things like, "Jesus Christ, I'm burning up inside, and I can't stand another night. I can't take it anymore." So upon seeing his, apparent suffering, research assistant Craig Haney let him out of the experiment.
Oh. Okay, then.
Yes. In a 1992 documentary movie about the Stanford Prison Experiment called Quiet Rage, Corpy asserted that the prison experiment had deeply affected him and it caused him to later become a prison psychologist.
Huh.
But in a later interview in 2017, He said that his mental breakdown had been a fake, that he only did it so that he could return to studying for a graduate exam, because he'd originally been told before they started the experiment that he could study while he was, quote, imprisoned. But then the guards, the prison staff assigned to guards, wouldn't let him study. And he also said that he regretted that he hadn't filed a false imprisonment charge against Zimbardo and the rest of the experimenters at the time.
Yeah, he could have won that one.
He probably could have. So yeah.
Did they film this?
A lot of it was filmed, yes.
Yo, they got actual tapes of what the fuck happened.
Yeah, but apparently there have been several documentaries about this. You can watch stuff about it. So like I said, there's that 1992 documentary, and then there's another one that we'll talk about in a minute. So while Zimbardo's experiment has been criticized overall for its ethics, Zimbardo said that he needed to treat the breakdown as real and release Corpy, even if he thought it wasn't. But Zimbardo did say he believes that Corpy's 2017 interview where he said that the breakdown was fake is a lie.
He's a good actor.
Yeah, apparently he's a good actor. So, on to day 4.
If I wanted to get out to keep studying, I'd be like, I am seeing people.
You're seeing people? Is that like I see dead people?
Yeah. Oh, I see Abraham Lincoln.
That might be cause for concern if you're seeing Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah, I probably got tired of it.
So on to day 4. Day 4 saw the guards trying to divide the prisoners based on whether they perceived as good behavior or rebellious behavior, and that started causing division among the prisoner group. The inmates started distancing themselves from one another, with different groups believing that other prisoners were snitches and vice versa.
Damn.
So other prisoners that were considered to be rebels were seen as a threat because they were threatening the status quo, because everybody just wanted to get clothes and their sleeping cots back, because they're still being denied those at this point.
They're sleeping on concrete.
They're basically sleeping on concrete, yeah. And then prisoner 819 began showing symptoms of distress. He started crying in his cell. Eventually, a priest was brought in to speak with him, but he wouldn't talk to the priest and instead insisted that he have a doctor. And so after all of this, Zimbardo reassured him, that he's not a prisoner, and reassured him of his actual identity and pulled him out of the experiment.
So one person's actually gone insane.
So one person probably faked it just to go back to his studies, and one person actually might have had a breakdown. And when prisoner 819 was leaving, the guards instructed the remaining inmates to shout loudly and repeatedly altogether, 819 did a bad thing.
Huh.
Yeah, so they're trying to make the other inmates criticize the one for leaving.
If I was on the prison, I'd be like, y'all are assholes. Then I probably got thrown through a window or something.
But then you might be out.
Then I got a good lawsuit.
Yeah, there were people who wanted to do lawsuits over this. So on to day 5. Day 5 was supposed to be a scheduled visitation day for friends and family, meant to imitate visitations at prisons. So Zimbardo made the visitors wait long periods of time before they could see their loved ones in this experiment. And only 2 visitors could see any one prisoner at a time, and only then just for 10 minutes at a time while a guard watched.
All right.
So of course, it was a lot of the parents of the students who came to see them, and conditions were so bad that they were concerned about their well-being and whether they had enough to eat. And things were so bad that a lot of parents left with plans to contact lawyers to gain early releases for their children.
Damn.
Yes, and this is by day 5 when things are already this bad.
It's supposed to go on for 14 days.
It was supposed to go on for 14 days. So on that same day, visitation day, A colleague of Zimbardo's, Gordon H. Bauer, arrived to check on the experiment, and he questioned Zimbardo about the variables that he was searching for. So, like I said, way back at the beginning, when the stated purpose of the experiment, that's a lot of variables they're trying to look for, and how they really should have one experiment for each effect of something on there. Yeah, he was already being questioned about it.
Okay, then.
And another social psychologist, another colleague of Zimbardo's, Christina Maslock, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, also visited, and she was very distressed after observing how the guards were abusing and treating the prisoners. In addition to everything else, they were now forcing them to wear bags over their head at this point.
Real prisons aren't this fucking bad.
Yeah, real prisons aren't this bad. This is still when they're restricting their clothes, not giving them their sleeping cots, and now they're forcing them to wear bags over their heads. So she called Zimbardo out about his lack of oversight and lack of caring and the ethical problems inherent in this study, and she made it evident that she said she actually called Zimbardo out and said he personally himself had been changed by his role as superintendent and didn't even recognize who he was anymore.
It's Baghead Jimmy.
Yeah, he's Baghead Jimmy at this point. So in response to Christina Maslock calling him out on this, and from the shared opinions of parents and other researchers, Zimbardo decided that he was going to end the experiment the next day.
6 days.
6 days. It was supposed to last 2 weeks. They made it 6 days.
They hired the wrong people.
They didn't hire the wrong people. Zimbardo ran a shit experiment.
Like I said, he can't run a target.
Yeah, so like I said, due to Maslock's objections, parents' concern, and the increasing brutality exhibited by the guards of the experiment, Zimbardo had to end the study on day 6. So he gathered all the participants to let them know that the experiment was over, and he arranged to pay them for the 6 days of the experiment. And then he met with them for several hours, debriefing them, talking about their experiences, first with the guards, then with the prisoners, and then finally everyone together.
I bet a lot of fights happened.
No, apparently no one fought each other. But I think there were some hard feelings between the prisoners and the guards.
You beat me with that wooden baton, asshole.
Yeah, and so in addition to the debriefing at the experiment when it closed, all the participants were also asked to write out their observations, their feelings, their experiences of the experiment, and then mail them to Zimbardo after that.
You know what I wrote down? I hate everybody that I had to experience this with.
Fair assessment.
And also, fuck you, Zimbardo.
Yeah.
That's what I would have wrote in my letter.
Fair assessment. So, of course, once the experiment was concluded, as you do when you're a researcher running experiments like this, you go to publish your findings. But usually when you do a psychology experiment, you want it published in The American Psychologist, which is like the psychology journal.
That didn't happen.
Yeah, no, he eventually did, but before he did that, because The American Psychologist is peer-reviewed, you have to get your study and your findings reviewed by other people in the profession and say, yep, they did the experiment well before it can be published. But before he did that, he published his findings in the Naval Research Reviews, the International Journal of Criminology and Penology, and the New York Times Magazine.
Clout chaser.
Yeah, clout chaser, and not peer-reviewed journals, which is generally seen as a no-no in scientific studies like this.
They see this guy as a clout chaser, and he is one.
Pretty much, yes. Good call. A psychology instructor at both New York University and the University of Amsterdam named David Amodio dismissed Zimbardo's study, saying that by releasing it to these, quote, obscure journals demonstrated that Zimbardo wasn't able to convince fellow psychologists of the validity of his experiment and get it published in The American Psychologist, which is exactly why peer review exists. so that bullshit experiments that don't meet, scientific study criteria don't get published.
Yeah, I know one. It's this guy.
Yeah, it's this guy. So Zimbardo publishing his study in these other journals was seen as violating the tradition of scientific dissemination by publishing in only peer-reviewed journals. But Zimbardo claimed that he had an agreement with the Office of Naval Research. Remember, they are the ones who funded the experiment, that required him to publish his findings in their journal, the Naval Research Review.
Yeah, I think that's a load of bullshit.
Yeah, we don't know, but that's why he claims he published it there. And he said that the International Journal of Criminology and Penology had reached out to Zimbardo and invited him to write about his study in their journal. And then that he wrote the New York Times Magazine journal to share his findings with a broader audience. Clout chaser.
Yeah, I hear a load of bullshit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, and he says that he did those first because at the time his article still needed to pass through the strict requirements of the American Psychologist, which is, like I said, the official journal of the American Psychology Association. It finally was published in the American Psychologist in 1973, but it's still been criticized.
For good reason.
Yes. So according to Zimbardo's interpretation of his experiment, it demonstrated that the simulated prison caused the participants' behavior. Basically, everything you saw out of the prison guards was a result of the prison condition.
I think that's a load of bullshit.
Yeah, he claimed that because of this, what he called situational attribution, basically means everything that happened is because of the situation they were in. He said the results were comparable to those of the Milgram experiment, the other one we just talked about.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, so others have said that the guards assumed the aggressive roles due to encouragement from the researchers rather than just because of the environment.
So I'd much rather go through the Milgram experiment.
Yeah. So yeah, what he said has very much been criticized. There was a study in 2012 on what's called demand characteristics by psychologist Peter Gray, who said that the participants in the prison experiment were more likely to do what they believed the researchers wanted them to do. And in the case of the prison experiment, quote, to act out their stereotyped views of what prisoners and prison guards do. So basically, it had nothing to do with the environment at all, and everything to do with what the participants felt like the experimenters wanted them to do.
Yeah, no.
No, that's actually probably a pretty good indication of what happened. Because remember, Zimbardo's trying to say, oh, everything that happened in our experiment was solely a product of the prison environment that we created.
Yeah, I don't know.
And this other guy's saying, that's bullshit. It happened because they picked up on cues from you guys running the experiment on what you wanted them to do.
Yeah, that's probably true. And they probably already were kind of pissed because they got arrested by cops.
Yeah. And then in 1975, there was another study on the prison experiment that was done, where it said that the prison experiment was a result, again, of demand characteristics and not the environment, and that there was no single definition of prisoner behavior, and participants were simply acting in the role to which they had been assigned.
This is not a role play, but they treated it like one.
Yeah, basically they treated it like a role play, and it wasn't a real experiment at all because everybody went into it treating it like role play. So you're not going to get any usable data out of a bunch of people who go into an experiment treating it like a role-playing game.
Yeah. And he basically told them it was going to be a role play, kind of.
That's kind of what happened. And so conclusions and observations drawn from the experiment are now largely seen as subjective and anecdotal, and nearly impossible for other researchers to reproduce and replicate accurately, which is a very important indicator of whether an experiment has been done well and scientifically, is can you replicate the results? If you can't, you probably fucked up in your experiment somewhere.
Yeah, I don't think anybody can replicate what happened there. Because that's just like that's some next level. Whoa, what
Yeah.
the fuck?
Yeah, in 1973, another person named Eric Fromm argued that because only a third of the guards displayed sadistic behaviors, the prison experiment is actually a better example of how a situation doesn't influence a person's behavior. So exactly the opposite of what Zimbardo was claiming. He says that there were generalizations in the experiment's results and argued that the personality of an individual does affect behavior when imprisoned. So again, like I said, completely counter to what Zimbardo tried to say the results said.
I don't know how I'm feeling about this one. I like the other one better. I like the second one you talked about, where it's basically they treat it like roleplay.
Yeah, that's just another way of kind of saying the same thing.
Yeah, that kind of works too.
So, like I said, critics have described the study as unscientific at best and fraudulent at worst. A lot of researchers were troubled by Zimbardo's methodology and the simplicity of his experiment and interpretations. Specifically, French researcher Thibault Le Texier, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, was among the strongest critics. He pointed out that many of Zimbardo's conclusions were actually written out in advance of the experiment. So he went into the experiment with his conclusions already drawn and wanting the experiment to yield the results that he expected.
No, that's
Which is
true.
exactly how experiments don't work.
No, that's true. That's just a load of shit.
Yeah, so this Le Texier guy said that that's what he was doing and that the experiment was wholly designed and manipulated to produce the results that Zimbardo wanted.
That might be true.
Yeah, that's really true, which is exactly not what you do when conducting a scientific experiment.
What were this guy's credentials like? What did he have to his name that meant something?
Who?
The guy who ran the experiment?
Zimbardo?
Yeah.
He was a psychology instructor at Stanford University.
How the hell did he get past?
He must have been decent at one point, but yeah. So yeah. Let's see, where were we in my notes?
Well, he couldn't fucking run a target, like I said.
Yeah. Of course, Zimbardo dismissed Letechier's claims, claiming that his attack ignores any contradictory data he got from his experiment. But the original participants of the experiment were interviewed for a National Geographic documentary. Remember, I told you we'd get into another documentary on this.
Yeah.
Called The Stanford Prison Experiment: Unlocking the Truth, that aired on November 13th, 2024. So not that long ago.
Last year.
Yeah, and interviews with the original participants largely confirmed many of Letechier's claims, namely that Zimbardo had these preconceived conclusions that he wanted the experiment to yield.
Well, goddamn.
Yeah. In particular, critics have argued, and the interviews from this documentary backed up, that the guards were asked directly to behave in certain ways in order to confirm Zimbardo's preconceived conclusions.
Oh, shit.
Yes. Former prisoner Clay Ramsey, for instance, who replaced Corpy when Corpy left the experiment, quickly became disillusioned with the whole thing. He said it had no intellectual integrity at all, noting that this was especially obvious during the staged parole board hearings. And he said they clearly didn't have any kind of common script. Remember, at least the Milgram experiment had scripts that were supposed to be the same for every participant. And he said, so I came up with the idea of a hunger strike, and then most of my behavior was doing nothing. It turned out to be more dramatic than it had to be.
Damn.
Yeah. So Zimbardo has repeatedly insisted over the years that he simply put college kids in a situation with little guidance and just let things evolve. But we've seen that that's not really true. The guards most notably participated in a lengthy training session that lasted for several hours, in which they were given a daily schedule for the prisoners and tips for inflicting psychological pain, that only started with referring to them by numbers rather than their names.
So he was just like, hey, I know you're a prisoner, but you're going to get mad at this dude for looking at you weird.
Yeah, so basically Zimbardo designed the whole thing of what the guards were supposed to do each day.
Yikes.
Yeah, instead of just letting it evolve like he said he did. And also, Zimbardo occasionally allowed members of his research team to go into the experiment environment. And there's even audio from, one of the recordings of the experiment of a research assistant coaching a reluctant guard and urging him to be tougher and in his treatment on the prisoners.
He's like, come on. I know you're calling by his numbers, but like, you gotta say it with some more.
Yeah, so in addition to fucking up his own experiment results by trying to manipulate what the guards were doing, it had another negative effect of leading many of the guard participants to believe that they're not part of the actual experiment, and that the experiment only concerns the behavior of the prisoners, and that they're, like actors with the researchers, kind of like the actor learner of the Milgram Experiment.
Well, the actor at the Milgram Experiment at least knew he was an actor.
Yeah, he knew he was an actor, but but letting the other research assistants come in and instruct the guards on what to do made the people who were assigned the guard role think that they weren't actually a part of the experiment when they were.
They're like, what the fuck are we here for?
Yeah, and like I said, if and that's why part of running a psychological experiment is so hard. You have to, deceive the people involved so they don't know what you're actually doing, because if they know the aim of your goal, then it's going to influence their behavior. And same way with the people who were assigned the guard role, thinking they weren't actually part of the experiment. That's going to influence their behavior and make them act differently than if they're actually part of the experiment.
Yeah.
Yeah. A former guard named Dave Eshelman said, "It was made very clear to us that we were not part of the experiment. We were there to help the researchers get the results from the prisoners that they wanted to see." So backing up the claims that they had certain results they wanted to see. "So our job was to make them uncomfortable, give them a sense of fear, but not use physical violence. We could do everything else within our power to create that fear, and I took that very seriously, because I was on board with what they were trying to do, expose the prison system as evil. Given the zeitgeist at the time, we were all on board with that. Those were the days when anybody with the establishment was automatically evil, and what more evil part of the establishment could there be than the prison system?"
Yeah, I kind of don't like this guy.
Yeah, so like I said, this whole experiment was an absolute dumpster fire. But one of the only positive outcomes to come out of the Stanford Prison Experiment was that it led United States universities to completely overhaul their ethical requirements for any experiments involving human subjects.
Nice.
Yeah. And so that was the Stanford Prison Experiment.
A bunch of bullshit wrapped into a piece of toilet paper.
That is a very accurate description. Good job.
Yeah.
All right, so I hope you enjoyed that. That was our episode on unethical experiments. And if you like what you heard, then be sure to like and subscribe. And thank you for listening.